All right, it's noon and we're off. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for UVC's Rebuild Upstate webinar series. This is our third installment, and today we're focusing on a very important part of our economy, the higher education sector. This is obviously a big driver of employment and revenues for a number of sectors of our economy, not just the institutions themselves, but entire communities depend on it. So today we'll be learning more about how some of the leaders in this space are adapting to the new normal and what they're doing to try and reopen campuses safely. Just a reminder that the webinar lasts 1 hour. We will end promptly at 1. If you have questions, please use the question and answer session at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions, and we will select them to ask the panelists towards the end of this program. Thank you again, and it's my great pleasure to have the Rochester Beacon joining us again for this webinar titled Lessons in Education. And we would also like to thank the Central New York Business Journal and Utica Observer Dispatch for the support that they have provided us in spreading word of this event. And final reminder is that UVC, as all of you may know, is a not-for-profit, and we subsist based on donations and sponsorships. So if you're at all interested about supporting us or what we do and how you can be a part of our growing ecosystem, please go to uvc.org. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce Alex Zapesochny, who will be our moderator. Alex is a serial entrepreneur based in Rochester, and one of the many hats he wears is as publisher of the independent not-for-profit publication, the Rochester Beacon.
Thank you, Nasser. It's a pleasure to be collaborating with UVC, and good afternoon to everybody that's joining us today. Proud to introduce and happy to introduce the panelists that are with us for this important event, Rebuild Upstate Lessons in Education. And our first guest is Dr. Linda LeMura, who is president of Moyne College in Syracuse, New York. She is the first female layperson to ascend to the presidency of a Jesuit institution in the United States. Before being named president, Dr. LeMura served for 7 years as the college's provost and vice president for academic affairs. A summa cum laude graduate of Niagara University, she received an MS and a PhD in applied physiology from Syracuse University. And our second guest today is Dr. Randall Van Wagoner, who is the president of Mohawk Valley Community College. He recently completed 4 years serving as president of the New York Community College Association of Presidents and serves on the National Policy Trust for Jobs for the Future. His recent book, Competing on Culture, Driving Change in Community Colleges, provides insight on how organizations can thrive in uncertain times. Obviously, we have very uncertain times at this point. Thank you for both joining us today. And on today's discussion, which will center on the challenges, risks, and opportunities arising from the pandemic, I'm going to start by asking the question that both of you are getting every single day, many times, which is, what is your plan for this fall? And Dr. LeMura, can you start, please?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for inviting us. It's an honor to be here with you today and with all of our guests. And it's a distinct privilege and honor to work here today with Randy, a wonderful colleague at a very, very important institution in Central New York. Our plan, quite simply and succinctly, is to open and to open with gusto. There are a multitude of caveats in that reopening, but I can say with clarity and assurance that we have been preparing literally 7 days a week for weeks and months to reopen and to invite our freshmen first on August 14th. The campus will reopen with a very serious testing protocol. We have isolation and quarantine capabilities in place. We have rigorous resources available to our students in so far as behavior is concerned, in terms of how we will ensure cleanliness and disinfecting all of our buildings, ways of proceeding in the Jesuit vernacular in terms of how we relate to one another insofar as our teaching, our learning, our socializing, and in our case, very openly worshiping. And in fact, reducing density everywhere, early and often, in order to mitigate the effects of COVID.
And Dr. Van Wagoner.
Yeah, I echo Linda's comments about excited to be here, and thank you for the invitation, and certainly to be on the panel with Linda. I think we can have some fun with this because fun is not always easy to find these days, so I'm really looking forward to this. Our plan at NVCC, we as a community college, it's slightly different than many of the 4 years. Our campus population is only about 10% residential in a normal academic year. So our residential plan is much different, where all of our students will be in singles. It's only about 40% of our beds will be available. So that's greatly reduced because everything that can be remote mostly is. It's about a little more than 20% of our courses and programs are in technical programs that teaching welding and machining on campus. Those courses will be taught 100% on campus. So with that, the density reduction, we've been bringing back our staff in slow, staggered in 3 phases, so that by August 24th, we'll have just short of half of our employees on campus. And that's pretty much our plan for the fall semester. Our biggest challenge is making sure that our students have access to internet and study spaces, which is what we've learned from the spring is their biggest need. So we've been planning greatly around that, and we've tried to maintain a consistent plan as much as we can with all of the changing variables around us to give our faculty and staff the greatest chance of planning, I guess you could say, the best pandemic-friendly learning environment and student experience that we can offer.
Well, maybe first starting off with one of the big challenges, and it's probably a slightly larger challenge, it sounds like, at Lemoyne, but one of the concerns that certainly individuals have is, okay, you're going to have these young people who are living together, who think of the college experience as not a time to necessarily self-isolate, but to be together, go to parties, etc. What is it that Lemoyne is planning to do, both in terms of kind of processes, but also in terms of communication, to make sure that potentially dangerous, unhealthy contact is not being had?
So the first part of your question is actually the easiest. The processes are in place and guided by scientists and epidemiologists in the CDC, in Onondaga County Health Department, and the New York State Department of Health. That's the easy part. It's a fantastic plan. We know we can implement it, but we have to rely on our students to execute on the plan. That's a heavy lift, and we're not shy to admit that we have significant challenges ahead of us in that regard. So we communicate early and often about our expectations for behavior. At Lemoyne College, we pride ourselves on the sense of community. In fact, we entice students to enroll in our institution because they feel that sense of closeness and community with our professors and administrators and staff across the entire campus. It is, in essence, a family away from their home family. So given that disconnect, what do? Well, the first thing that I have said to our students already, and I will say it again to them when they come to campus, is, I believe in you. This is a distinctive moment in your young lives, a once in a 100-year lifetime, to prove the naysayers wrong. I think you can do this and show everyone, largely adults, that you're perfectly capable of thinking of others, not just yourself, but behaving on behalf of the greater good. And oh, by the way, because humans do make mistakes, there are penalties for not behaving in the way we would like you to behave. We know right now in Onondaga County that the infection rate is less than 1%. That's extraordinary. We also know that the intervening variable, if that infection rate changes, is probably college students coming into the region from different states, they have the ability to either drive that number up or the ability to keep it stable or even reduce it. The onus is on them. This is a chance for them to come away as the greatest generation ever, proving that they can do what others say is undoable.
And Dr. Van Wagoner, I mentioned that this is a little bit less of an issue because, as you mentioned, it's a smaller percentage of people that you have living on campus, but this still has to, I'm sure, be a concern. What are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, it's similar to Linda. I love, that was a great way to frame it, because that is truly what the behavior changes that need to be adopted by the students who choose to live on campus, and even those who are taking classes on campus as commuters. A whole new set of rules and regulations and protocols and procedures that weren't in place when they were last on campus in the spring. We've actually gotten a chance to prototype those over the summer as we continued some incomplete courses of the welding and machining, for example, that had to be suspended in the spring. We're able to teach those classes and complete them here over the summer, and initiate those students in the new protocols. So reinforcing the behaviors and that greater good in the community, that if people don't follow the protocols, the whole thing can blow up and we go full remote, and it's on them. So they have a big part to play in everyone's success. And I think that goes to society as a whole, that everybody's behavior affects everybody else, and just trying to reinforce that message time and again.
So one question really for each of you. I think a number of us kind of hear from people who have college age children. Some people have been thinking of taking gap years. Some people are, thinking maybe we don't apply for, or maybe don't attend this fall. What have been the results on each of your campuses in terms of individuals who have decided for health, safety, or maybe even financial reasons to not attend this fall, or what are the other things you're hearing from students about how they're going to behave differently in terms of the expectation of them attending college this year? And Dr.
I'll
LeMura.
start. Sure, Alex. Thank you. We have not had a large number of requests for gap years. Part of the concern with a gap year in this environment is that the traditional gap year usually implies travel, international travel. And the pandemic really precludes that kind of activity at the moment. Students have been writing to us since they left Lemoyne in March, begging us to reopen. They're craving coming back to campus, and they recognize that this will be decidedly a different experience, but it's one that they're willing to really work for. And I remind them when they contact me that you're asking us to do this, and you're telling me that you're eminently capable of behaving as an adult. So I'm putting that preposition right back onto their plate, saying, okay, we take you at your word, and that's why I know that you can deliver on this promise, that you will do what's necessary. So for those individuals who are unable for health reasons to take advantage of the full Lemoyne experience, we are accommodating them. It's a very heavy lift. It's very difficult to do, but we are offering online education for those individuals who still want a Jesuit liberal arts education. But that's a relatively small number. Most of the students will be taking part in a residential way with our faculty and staff.
But for us, the notion of a gap year for our students and traveling and those kinds of things don't typically come to mind for our student population that is roughly 70% Pell eligible. About 25% of our enrollment for the fall semester actually occurs during the month of August. Our enrollment typically is connected to the traditional unemployment rate. When unemployment spiked during the Great Recession, our enrollment followed suit. Unemployment was close to 10%, and our enrollment increased 12% in fall of 2012 after various federal benefits ran out. We're not seeing that just yet with regard to enrollment and the unemployment, as we wait to see what the next federal stimulus package looks like. But we are starting to see an increase in students who are withdrawing from four-year colleges as those plans shift and change with the various adjustments that four-year colleges are making. Students are looking to say, if I'm going to be online, I think I'm going to stay home and save money. So we're starting to see more of that. Hence our promotion that Kate so kindly put in the chat of stay home, stay safe, and save money.
Well, let's pick up on that piece about studying from home, because that seems to be at the very least something that a lot of people are thinking about in the short term, because it does seem that most universities and colleges kind of have one of multiple setups. Either they are teaching some classes online now, they are teaching some classes to certain vulnerable populations now, or they have a plan B that if there's a spike and they need to close down campus, that they can quickly convert to that. What are, what are your thoughts kind of more generally about what more online classes in a university setting means for those students, for their education, and also for their social development? And maybe Dr. LeMura first.
Sure. So obviously we believe fervently in a residential experience, and the data generated from our college indicate that it is a successful mode of learning. Retention rates, graduation rates, placement rates, starting salaries. If you were to look at those data with a fine-tooth comb, you would see that the residential model that we revere on our campus, it works. Nevertheless, we recognize that there is a need at the same time for options based on individual differences, differences in learning, differences in terms of pedagogy and the kind of discipline, how those things interact, where online learning might actually make good sense. I'm reminded in your question, Alex, about many articles written by Thomas Friedman after the Great Recession in 2008, where he warned all of us about, the MOOCs are coming, the massive open online education experience, where students would sit in, their basements and study with a million other students. And that's really not what parents, their aspiration for their children is. So the devil is in the details in terms of offering residential experiences that are affordable, and at the same time having that tricky balance depending upon where you are in life's continuum to also offer online options as well. So it's a both and, it's not an either or.
Dr. Van Wagoner?
Yeah, great points. The notion of the social development of a residential college, that is so much of what comes to mind when people think of traditional higher education. For us at community colleges, I think of it in terms of building social capital for many of our students who come from lower income populations, that they come to us with no general social network of avenues toward jobs, and they come to us blank, in need of those connections, and that typically happens outside the classroom, in hallway conversations, in office hours, with faculty and staff, and through clubs and organizations. And that's one of my greatest concerns that weighs on me is through all of this, how will students make those connections? So we're trying to find ways to leverage technology as best as we can to help students make those connections. And the online, it'll be interesting. I think this is the real great sorting period for higher education. I mean, we clearly have all the data show with our soaring costs and new entrants into the market that I think the pandemic has kind of exposed the underbelly of higher ed a little bit, in that it's a little, for those that just want the content, they're going to be able to find the content elsewhere and more conveniently and more cheaply, and connect to employers and jobs who aren't as interested in credentials as they are about skills. So at that, zooming out and taking a big picture of higher education, this is the next couple of years, even couple of months, this next semester alone may very well shed light on what the new future of higher education is going to look like.
Well, let's pick up on that point, because one of the reasons we definitely wanted to have this panel is because all across upstate New York, higher education is such a big part of the community in terms of jobs and employment, obviously workforce development. So the financial sustainability and health and vitality of higher education is really important, in addition to the educational outcomes. For each of your institutions, and feel free to talk about this more broadly, I mean, what has this financially meant so far since things began in spring, and what do you anticipate the financial results to be really over the next year?
So I'll take that first, Alex. I see some really compelling questions in the chat box, and I certainly would love the opportunity to address all of them, but I recognize that we have a time limit. But let me try to address the one on finances. Yes, of course, finances are a concern. It would be completely disingenuous for me to sit here and tell you, oh, we didn't think about it. On the other hand, it is also true to say that we could remain closed and still navigate through it, albeit with immense pain, but it would not close Moyne College. So these things, this context needs to be clear to our audience. So what are the mitigating factors in between as we came to this decision? Follow the data, follow the science. The infection rate, first of all, is less than 1%. We know where every single one of our students resides in the states from which they come. We have a very carefully articulated plan on how to deal with individuals coming from states with hotspots. And also, you know, this notion about, you know, this experiment. We know from the data that individuals who work in COVID-rich hotspots, including emergency rooms and in hospitals, who wear masks, not necessarily hazmat suits, but masks, the data tell us, and including Anthony Fauci, who I should add is Jesuit educated, majored in the classics, and is a rock star and an amazing scientist, tell us that risk can be mitigated. Insofar as the moral persuasion argument, you can do this, people younger than the 18 to 21 year old age group have fought in wars with great valor to fight for our liberty. They've started world-changing businesses. They've saved lives. I think putting off parties is eminently doable, and they deserve the right to try. In the event that the numbers go in the wrong way, we are taking on following the metrics carefully every moment of every day. We'll decide to take students off campus if that's what we need to do. So data, science, analytics, the best minds on our campus and beyond our campus, these are the things that have told us this is a very good, not experiment, but an opportunity to do the right thing on behalf of families and the community who needs us.
Yeah, masks, for sure. well said. Thinking about the financial impacts, I think, as I said, the great sorting, zooming out, it will be the great sorting, and I think there are plenty of predictions of some colleges that won't be able to survive very long on this. For public community colleges anyway, for our sector, we're very much based on county and state support and trying to keep tuition as low as possible. And it's mostly based on enrollment. So the extent to which our enrollment follows, you know, that will determine a great sense of our financial future. And some colleges are in better shape than others. It's across the board in every sector, really. For me, I'm most interested in the extent to which this might prompt some new business models for both public and private higher education. Might we see in the next 3 to 5 years more influence from the private sector? And over the years, we've had an increase in employer influence curriculum, and now you're seeing, you know, the tech giants just saying we're so frustrated. What Amazon a year ago, July, I believe Amazon said, we're so frustrated with higher education, we're going to established our own internal platform to train 125,000 of our 600,000 employees internally because they're so frustrated. Google just came out with a new round of IT certificates that those types of trends and artifacts of what's happening in the higher education private sector space is it's probably going to shift our financial model over the next few years as well. I don't know what that looks like for public higher education, but certainly overall, those are some pretty big forces that at the macro level that will shape our financial future, I think.
Well, one of the other things that I think is interesting, I'd love to get both of your thoughts on it, is yes, there may be other ways to do education, there may be other models, but this is also really the largest, single largest, kind of most globally relevant event that young students have ever lived through. It's challenging them. Dr. LeMura mentioned, younger people in the past fought wars. I mean, there really hasn't been anything like that for the, let's say the 18 to 22 age set right now. How is just is the experience of living through this adversity, living through this moment where, this is a shared experience across just about everybody they know and across all these countries. Is there a way to take the lessons from that and to incorporate that? How will that change kind of education from a character and culture standpoint? What does this mean to the future of these students living through this moment?
What a spectacular, complex question. Thank you for that, Alex. First of all, one of the greatest lessons, I think, from this life-changing, game-changer event for all of us, but particularly for young people, is this notion of being comfortable with ambiguity. And that's one of the quintessential lessons of a liberal arts education, is that there's no such thing as black and white. The ability to move through complex problems requires a kind of teamwork and an understanding of context, an understanding of science, of economics, of political science, and all of their great richness in order to make good decisions on behalf of yourself as an individual, your family, your community, and the greater good. And I think that it will be an important moment, if you will, Alex, for the humanities, the study of the humanities, which have been pounded writ large across this country. The need for clear, cogent thinkers, what philosophy gives us, the ability to speak English and potentially a second language with clarity and assurance, understanding contextual history, so that collectively, on behalf of the common good, we make good decisions. While others are divesting from these very disciplines, we plan to do the opposite and double down on them, because that's what makes for a well-rounded individual who can handle the stress of the moment, this unbelievably difficult moment that will be etched in our memories for the rest of our lives. And that's where we need to ensure that we're doing the kind of consultation that's required, and not moving to make quick, draconian decisions without that careful consultation. That's my read of the situation.
Dr. Van Wagoner, I know that one of your areas of expertise is culture. What is it that creates kind of culture within a university setting? So maybe really really same question to you. What will this mean for the students that are right now going to be attending college?
I'm really enjoying this, and I appreciate Linda's willingness to go first, because I think both of our institutions, while we have very different missions, I think we both have elements of each. When I talk about workforce development and job readiness, there's an aspect of Moyne that's a big piece of what Moyne prepares their graduates to do. They just do it through a different way as a residential campus. And the humanities, while we have many technical programs, the humanities are a big part of our transfer curriculum. So it's fun that, as Linda, as you share your perspective, what comes to mind for this, for me with this is I think about the grit and the resilience and the anxiety that our students face, the increase in mental health issues, across society that's of course reflected not only in the general population, but our own student population and really college students in general, and the supports that our colleges have to provide for that. And while we talk about what that means for our students, one of our 4 core values at NBCC is model the way, and we're supposed to be modeling the way for our students, and yet there's no manual for this for anybody. And how our faculty and staff can find the resilience and the grit to stay with this, and everything is just seemingly clunkier and slower, and it's hard to move at the pace that you did before. That creates challenges, and then yet you have to be there 110% for the students. So for the faculty and staff, this, and I think for many faculty, this was probably the summer that never was, because so many of them were cleaning up the spring with incompletes and trying to prepare for a fall that will be like no other. It's one thing to start or complete a semester fully remote. It's another to start a semester fully remote. So I think the grit and resilience amplified as the great challenges and lessons of what our students and our employees are facing.
Well, picking up on that, actually one of the questions that came across a little while ago was, what are your institutions doing to address vulnerable faculty and staff? And maybe I'll broaden that question out a little bit. How will the work of both vulnerable, but really for all faculty and staff, and maybe in particular faculty, how will things look different to them? And what's the feedback you're hearing about how they are, what are the best practices they're figuring out for how to start and run classes, which are going to be, you know, all or partially online? And maybe Dr. LeMura, if you want to continue to keep going first.
Sure. First, just let me say, Randy, your comments on grit and resilience, they really speak to me, and amen to all of those things. Thank you for that. Our provost, Father Joe Marina, and our wonderful deans surveyed all of our faculty to discern who really wanted to be face-to-face 100% of the time, who preferred to do a hybrid approach, meaning sometimes maybe once or twice a week in person and then going online, and who needed, for various reasons, underlying health conditions, needed to be exclusively online. And from that, we surveyed every single faculty member. We then developed a plan to accommodate every single one of them. Now, the movement in March to online allowed our faculty to get the bugs out of the system, so to speak. It wasn't a perfect outlay of online learning from face-to-face. The reason it worked very well in our particular context really because the faculty already had relationships with the students before we went online. So for us, it worked. Again, not perfect, but it definitely worked. It will be harder for our faculty, obviously in the fall, starting online for that subset of individuals who will not see them face to face. But they've been working on this all summer long with our resource folks at Moyne College to prepare them for completely remote learning. So, you know, there's a learning curve, right? Given our tradition in history and Jesuit education, the sacred nature of the face-to-face relationship, but they're stepping up to the challenge, and we have every confidence that they will deliver an outstanding educational experience that is different, albeit completely different, but still of quality. And then for the others, the idea was if you're on campus, we're reducing density as much as possible. There are some disciplinary issues that we need to address, how to teach the sciences, in particular the laboratory sciences. All of those things came into what I like to refer to this complex minestrone of making a plan that we can execute on. And I think we're about there.
And what's the complex minestrone at your institution, Dr. Van Wagoner?
As simple a recipe as we possibly could. Very in a similar, leaning into the trust of the faculty to know what is going to work best in their discipline. We've been very fortunate in the spring. The faculty who had the most online experience, they rallied and without any administrative prompting, just started almost self-organized and supporting their colleagues who knew needed to go remote. So lots of professional development that has organically continued through the summer, that our academic administration has been able to support for faculty to continue evolving their remote and online instructional practices. And then making the schedule for the staffing, trying to make sure all of our student-facing offices are open, but with staggered staffing. We've been bringing people back in across 3 phases, July 20th, August 3rd, and August 24th. Those 3 phases have allowed us to put our protocols in place, take that extra step of what our campus check-in points are, door monitors, get your bracelet for the day that you can. That means if you see somebody with a bracelet, you know their temperature's been checked, they've taken the assessment, the daily survey, and we're all in this together. That's just that extra level of assurance, and I've gotten some good feedback from faculty and staff that that's very helpful. And then, of course, the accommodations, like Linda, you try to put the staffing out there, what the staffing plan is, and then work with the accommodations appropriately. And that goes not just with health risks, but trying to deal with the incredible variability in the K-12 situation for employees with school-age children, for what those needs will be, because the child care aspect to this adds a whole nother layer of complexity. So it has really pushed us. If we thought we were flexible before, it's really taken that notion to a whole nother level, and which I think has been good for the college.
Well, do each of your institutions have plans where you have kind of specific or objective thresholds that, hey, if we have this many outbreaks or if we have this many violations of social distancing, we're going to either not teach in person or send people home from the residential piece of the colleges, or and if not, or maybe in any case, kind of what's the plan by which, or the process by which you would figure out, hey, this is something's gone wrong. We have to take a step back and make it all online. LeMura first.
Sure. Thanks, Alex. As I mentioned earlier, we have a clearly articulated plan that is data-driven. And part of that is using the guidelines somewhat established by Governor Cuomo, in that in order to open in a region, the infection rate needs to be less than 5%. If it reaches 9%, the region needs to, quote unquote, go back into an economic pause. In our particular case, so the governor rightfully addressed the principle of subsidiarity, and he said institutions need to make decisions on a institution by institution basis, because we know our communities, we know our culture, we know our expectations for behavior, etc. We will be driven by, well, first, let me say that we're using something called an AMOCA app. Everyone in the community is required to have this app produced by epidemiologists at Johns Hopkins University. Well, they'll be putting in their symptoms on a daily basis, and the students will need to show their professors that they have the green light to enter campus. We know how many spaces we have available for quarantine and isolation, and as we're tracking the need to do quarantine and or isolation, that will help drive us on a decision making on a daily basis, the point at which we say we can't go anymore, we've reached capacity, we need to go completely online. The truth of the matter is, Alex, and to our wonderful listeners out there, we still believe, even with all these complexities, that we can manage these challenges. And if we can't, I just feel that our students will rise to the occasion and do the best they can to help us get through to the semester.
And for us, it's a fairly short answer. As a community college, our county sponsor is Oneida County. So we're staying very close contact with the county health department. And we're only expecting about 150 students to be living on campus. Otherwise, our students are commuting and are part of the community as the general population. So our plans will generally mirror what is happening at the time at the county level.
Very good. And I think we want to turn to a couple other questions that have been put into the Q&A. And of course, anybody who's listening who wants to keep adding Q&A. Please feel free to do so. That would be great. So one question, and actually this has been asked by a couple of different people, is it potentially not completely fair to students to put them in a situation where they are kind of, responsible for not messing up what happens at colleges in terms of social distancing, et cetera? I mean, do you have any concerns, maybe especially Dr. LeMura, about kind of putting this on the backs, as one of the questioners said, of students?
Sure. I read that. Sure, I read that question and tried to insert a bit of a response to that question. After studying the data, the rules for engagement, our students and their families' desire to reopen, after following the science, scientists and epidemiologists both, we concluded that it would be fair not to give them a chance to rise to the occasion. We also concluded it would be terribly unfair not only to our campus community and to our faculty, but also to the city of Syracuse, insofar as the economic spillover into the community as well. All of these things were taken into consideration. It's also important to note that it's not a secret. There's income inequality in this country. It's well documented. We all know that it's true. Those at the lowest end of the economic scale, whether on our community, in our campus, or the broader Syracuse community, would be negatively impacted if we closed. And in light of the scientific and epidemiological data, it was the right thing to try to do this. That's my best answer, and honest.
A slightly different question to you, Dr. Van Wagoner. Obviously, with community colleges, in addition to educating that 18 to 24-year-old cohort, you also have many students that are perhaps older, perhaps career switchers, maybe working and then going to school in the evenings. How do you feel that this situation is going to affect them as opposed to kind of that 18 to 24-year-old group?
Yeah, for some it does, and that is very true. Our average age is closer to 24 on average. So we have close to 25% of our students are 25 or older. And, technology is not everybody's friend for some. So that does present some challenges. And that's one more reason to push and try to open into that. I call it a masked normal. It's after spending 4 months in full remote mode, bringing staff back on campus. In a weekly email, I tried to warn them that it's going to be the same, but it's going to be different. It's going to feel weird because the density is so low, and it's like you're walking through the halls of and not seeing anybody for 10, 15 minutes or so as you walk through the halls. That for our students, that we need to have our labs and library and study spaces and support services open on campus, just because not everybody can do everything through Zoom. And this is probably going to be some form of our reality for some time to come. So the way I've approached it, at least personally, is the sooner you engage in whatever this mask normal is, beyond just going to the grocery store or the basics of survival, the sooner you're going to begin to adapt to what this is going to be like, because masks are probably going to be with us for quite some time, if not ever. So,
well said.
So another one of the questions was about how much are financial considerations a part of this, and each of you mentioned that, of course, it's the reality is for many colleges and universities, the financial piece of this is something that's potentially existential. Speaking maybe more broadly, not necessarily about your own institutions or even Upstate, what are the characteristics of colleges and universities that you feel, that may be in an existential kind of crisis here in terms of, what is it that, what is it about their model or their setup that makes them vulnerable, and obviously presumably, hopefully things that if people avoid them, or colleges that don't have those characteristics are in a safer position.
So I'll go first, I guess, again. Scott, thanks. Another amazing question. This is something that I think about every day. Colleges and universities were experiencing distress prior to COVID. Again, not a secret, publishable data. In fact, there's a question regarding Scott Galloway, and I'd love to opine on that only if there is time, and if you'll permit me. Essentially, the business model is broken. We in higher education already agree on that. There's unanimity there. I think there's a subset of institutions of higher learning that contribute extensively to income inequality because they're closing out the very people that they should want to serve. And that's in part because tuition rates are so exceptionally high, just looking at the sticker price, of course. The primary concern is one sole source of revenue, and that is tuition revenue. We cannot continue, we stopped essentially, but for the longest time, we were continuing to raise tuition above inflation, and that was wrong. That was absolutely a wrong move, and we need to own that, accept it, and admit it. Since the Great Recession in 2008, I think that was a reckoning in and of itself, and colleges and universities recognize that the increases in tuition should be closer and pegged to inflation rates, and that's in part why you're seeing so much distress in 2020. Essentially, the pandemic has laid in a layer of roughly 10 years of disruption within 6 months. So this reckoning is going to occur. Randy has referred to it already rather eloquently. I suspect we're going to see a shakeout. And in some ways, it is a shame because there should be a place for everyone in the higher education ecosystem. Some schools are better prepared than others. And as a result of that absolute truth, you will see some schools either merging, aligning, or closing.
I think there's the standard variables of size for the smaller the institution, the fewer resources, the smaller market, the more vulnerable they are. The smaller the endowment for the private colleges, the more vulnerable they are. For public higher education in this country, I think has moved from a public good to a private commodity. And over the last 20, 30 years, it's been disheartening to see. But I think that for me, what I've been thinking a lot about what institutions need to be doing for the future on this, and for me, it's those institutions that will survive will be the ones that have the greatest clarity of their value proposition. If you can clarify the value proposition of what makes you distinctive for your particular student population that you serve, those institutions will thrive despite the circumstances. They'll find a way because the value proposition will carry them forward.
I would agree with that. Value proposition and stop relying exclusively on tuition, diversify revenue streams. Those are the schools that are, to use Randy's words, gritty and resilient. Like MVCC and like Lemoyne.
Yes. So you mentioned, Dr. LeMura, that you wanted to address the comment about Scott Galloway and the comparison between colleges and cruise ships. Please let us know what you think.
Are you sure? No, the analysis about, let's see, there was Perish, Survive, and Struggle. His analysis was not based on rigorous research. It was not good statistical analysis. The analyses are not only not valid, but they're also not reliable. Even the casual observer taking a look at the names on the list would chuckle in that the analysis was so weak and perfunctory. It was, however, exceptionally provocative, and the media, of course, picked it up. So he used a few pieces of data from iPads, which is published and readily available data, in order to discern who would perish, survive, and thrive. And you know, at the end of the day, you cannot model mission, you cannot model hustle, perseverance, and the quality of ideas. And I think we should come back in a few years and revisit the list and see how good his analysis was. I'll stop there.
And I'll pick up on that, and although I don't have much to say regarding the study or the media piece of it, just something that you said, Linda, toward the end there, it's why the title of my book is Competing on Culture, because I do believe that some institutions can develop an organizational culture that can beat the odds. Before we talked about vulnerability and who is vulnerable, that when you've got a strong organizational culture that's adaptable, that is innovative, that has a high level of trust, has leadership at all levels, with people owning their processes and innovating at all levels on behalf of students, they're going to find the answers regardless of the challenges.
Well said. Amen.
There was one question that actually just kind of came across a few minutes ago. What would you think about consolidation and leveraging brand models like Cleveland Clinic has in healthcare? And, you know, I certainly think for the people who are maybe entrepreneurs or business people who are listening and they think about vulnerability, what would be wrong with potentially some colleges getting together or merging or kind of saying, all right, you know, we're going to develop, we're not going to be all things to all people. We're going to find things that we are particularly good at, things that where we can draw people from afar, or where we clearly can differentiate ourselves even online, even with
Sure.
remote learners. I mean, are there things that maybe from that entrepreneurial or business world that would make sense in terms of enabling colleges not just to survive, but to get better?
Yes. Yes, there would be nothing wrong with it. We know from the private sector that for mergers, acquisitions to work, Randy said it beautifully. There has to be some coalescence of the culture to work. I have been a proponent of leveraging academic intellectual resources prior to COVID. For years, we've been missing the boat on this opportunity to work with other institutions, public and private, but also in the business sector, in the medical sector as well. I don't see it as a threat to higher education. I see it as amplifying our mission and providing more pathways for students without compromising those disciplines that we hold near and dear to our heart that make for a meaningful, transformational educational experience. Once again, it's about both and, not either or. And I think Cleveland and other institutions have done a magnificent job in asking the hard questions of their constituents. How can we do things differently on behalf of the greater good? This notion that we are these silos, insular, not communicating with the business sector or working with the business sector, those days are over. I think it's anachronistic and actually, in my humble opinion, not intellectually robust. The business sector has a lot to learn from us, and we have so much to learn from our colleagues. We're not selling out by getting to the table to try to learn from one another on how we can better serve our student population.
Now, mergers and acquisitions, certainly you think of, I think of University of Purdue and Purdue University in Kaplan, and now University of Arizona just going global as well with their somewhat internally controversial purchase nonetheless. But so that there's mergers and acquisitions happening at that grand scale across the industry. But then for community colleges here in New York, I think when I talked earlier of the pandemic kind of surfacing some of the underbelly, I think there was all along some opportunities for deep shared services, maybe short of mergers and consolidation. And we had partnerships and we moved it, but now there's a little bit more of a burning platform, I think, that our the sense of urgency, to say the least, that our shared services, I think we've done more as a group of presidents of community colleges in the last 6 months than we have in the last, decade, of how much we're working together, collaborating, trying new things, pushing each other's thinking, and really trying to preserve the community in our name, that make sure that we don't sacrifice, no matter how much we change or work together, that we're able to secure the delivery of quality instruction and support services locally to meet the local needs of the community. So Keeping that in mind, I think there's a pretty broad landscape of partnership and shared services that we'll have to see just how far it goes in the coming years.
Well said.
So final question for each of you. I mean, I mentioned before, this is kind of a once in a lifetime event for students. I assume it's a once in a lifetime event for college and university presidents as well. So reflecting, hopefully, yes, and one that doesn't last for forever either. I mean, reflecting on your own experiences leading your institutions at this time, what have been kind of your biggest takeaways and maybe your impressions, both of your institutions and just the nature of what it's like to be in higher education during this hopefully once in a century pandemic?
It's exhilarating, Alex. And in other ways, it's frightening and frustrating, but this opportunity for our students to rise to the occasion, to watch our faculty coalesce and work so hard to give a high quality education under this tremendous duress, to watch all elements of our campus come together and punch above their weight to prepare for our students. It's miraculous what we're seeing here. And the notion that higher education is incapable of evolving, well, that narrative needs to change now. We are in the midst of tectonic plates shifting all around us, and this notion that we're no longer evolving, or the cliche is glacial pace. We move at a glacial pace. Well, that can be challenged now, and we have the proof of that. So for me, I'm so excited to start this year. I'm also a nervous wreck. And that's okay. Again, we're preaching a comfort with ambiguity, and here's the quintessential ambiguous event. Should we open? Should we close? What are the variables that we consider? And we weigh in with the depth of knowledge through careful consultation, and we concluded that we deserve a shot, we're ready to go, and we believe we can do this. It's exhilarating.
Yeah.
Dr. Van Wagoner?
Without finding a specific adjective of the emotion, I'll just say it's been very emotional for me, because it's prompted what lessons have I learned that I need to almost unlearn to find a way forward. How do I affirm, I guess what big lesson I've learned is how important trust is within an organization. To see people, as Linda said, punch above their weight, to do things they never would have thought, things that we used to say it can't be done, and now it has to be done. This makes me think differently about innovation. Innovation used to be something that we chase and we long for and we reach for, and now it's something we're trying to do as soon as we can because we're trying to stay ahead of something. And then trying to plan. We're ready to update our strategic plan this year in our linear 5-year model. It's how do we adapt our planning to be far more anticipatory and opportunistic? That often isn't thought of when you think of higher education, but I think it's become essential. So thinking about what lessons we need to unlearn, and building on trust to amplify anticipation within the culture. While at the same time finding a way, and I just want to mention this little piece in closing, given everything that's happened across the country, after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, I held meetings with all of our employees of color over the summer, and just to get their perspective and engage. And the number one thing is institutions in our society, we don't like to talk about race, and the way forward is to get people together for uncomfortable conversations, and yet we're all scattered remote and Zoom and whatever, and that's the biggest challenge, is how do we have some uncomfortable conversations that we need to have right now, given our current environment. That's going to be, I think, a great challenge for us going forward.
Well, thank you both very much. I mean, this has been a really interesting conversation. I mean, my big takeaway from it is that despite all the nerve-wracking uncertainty, that the staff, faculty, students that are part of your institutions are in very safe hands, and hopefully other institutions are handling it nearly as well as as both of you are. So, thank you for joining us. And I turn it back over to Nasser.
Thank you so much, Alex. What a great conversation. Linda and Randy, it just reminded me how much every time I spend time with you guys, I just learn from you and how much you guys inspire me. So thank you again for being part of our program today. And good luck to you as you face this great uncertainty of how things go in the fall. We're here to support you in any way that we can. Thank you so much.